What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right, so this is a video request for one of my subscribers. They wanted me to do, I guess, a comparison between Byron Scott and Paul Silas as head coaches. I guess to see, which one has been the more successful, who's had the better career, who's the better coach. This is extremely subjective because neither of these coaches, I would say, had the greatest success, though I'm leaning toward Byron Scott for obvious reasons. Both of these guys were solid NBA players. Paul Silas, not a Hall of Fame player, but he is in the College Basketball Hall of Fame, I should say. Not a professional Hall of Famer, but he was very solid. He was 6'7", 225 when he was playing, at least. He was the 10th overall pick in the second round, 1964, out of Creighton. He played 16 years in the NBA, and he played the power forward position. He played for the Hawks franchise. Back then, when he first was drafted, they were St. Louis Hawks, now known as the Atlanta Hawks. He played a few years for the Phoenix Suns. He played for the Boston Celtics, where he won a championship in 1970, I believe 1974 and 1976. He played 1 year for the Denver Nuggets, the first year that they were in the NBA as a franchise after the ABA-NBA merger. And he finished his career with the Seattle Supersonics, where he won a championship in 1979. He started his head coach. Well, before I go there, as far as his NBA resume or basketball resume, 3-time NBA champion, 2-time All-Star, 2-time NBA All-Defensive First-Team player, 3-time NBA All-Defensive Second-Team player. I'm just going to limit it to NBA honors. For his career, he averaged 9.4 points, just a hair under 10 rebounds per game at 9.9 rebounds per game, 2.1 assists. His coaching career began with the Clippers, where I believe he was a head coach with the San Diego Clippers, the then San Diego Clippers, for 3 seasons. Then he spent the better part of the 80s and 90s as an assistant coach for the Nets, Knicks, Nets twice actually, Suns and Hornets franchises. Then in 1999 became the head coach of the Hornets for a couple of years. He was a head coach of the Cavaliers. Infamously, I guess if you talk about what happened to him the first couple of years of LeBron James's career, and for a couple of years, he was the head coach of the Charlotte Bobcats. He boasted a 387 and 488 overall record as a head coach, or 442 win percentage. And in the postseason as a head coach, his record was 13 and 16 for 448 win percentage. Byron Scott had a similar NBA career in that he was never a perennial all-star, but he was a very, very good player. Very, very good player. I think he came out of Arizona, if I'm not mistaken. Arizona State. So Byron Scott, when he played, 6'4", 205 pounds. The 4th overall pick in the first round, 1983, out of Arizona State. He was selected by the Clippers, but I think he was a draft day trade, if I'm not mistaken, to L.A. And he played 15 years in the NBA, the shooting guard position. Played for 10 years with the Lakers. Then he played for about 2 years with the Pacers. Spent 1 year with the Vancouver Grizzlies. Came back to the Lakers in 96-97 season and played 1 year over in Greece, I believe. His coaching career began as an assistant with the Kings in 1998. He was the head coach of the Nets teams for about 4 years, including those back-to-back finals trips with the Nets, the Jason Kidd Nets. He coached the Hornets for a few years. He was the Cavaliers head coach for 3 seasons in the post-LeBron James era after 2010 and before he came back. And he coached the Lakers for a couple of years, the last few years of Kobe Bryant's NBA career. His NBA resume is 3-time NBA champion like Paul Silas. He was on the NBA All-Rookie team 1984. And those are his NBA honors. He won NBA Coach of the Year in 2008. And he was 2 times NBA All-Star Game head coach. His career averages of 14.1 points, 2.8 rebounds, and 2.5 assists. His NBA coaching record overall is 454 and 647 for a 412 win percentage. And his postseason record, however, is 33 and 24 for a 579 record. These 2 guys are also pretty much considered the 2 greatest coaches in New Orleans Pelicans history. Now, who was the better coach? I mean, if you've gone to 2 NBA finals like Byron Scott did, it's hard to say that Paul Silas is a better coach. I mean, you can make the argument, because I'm looking now, the best Paul Silas ever did was with the Charlotte Hornets in 2001, 2002, and they lost in the conference semifinals. So they never got to the conference finals, whereas Byron Scott got to 2 consecutive NBA finals. Paul Silas missed the playoffs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. And with Cleveland, he didn't qualify for the playoffs because he was fired by LeBron James. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times he missed the playoffs coaching. Byron Scott missed the playoffs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times. So that should deduct a little bit. You know, to be fair, Paul Silas, as I'm looking at these teams, he never really coached a great team. But, I mean, when you look at Byron Scott, he did go to 2 NBA finals. 2 times he was the All-Star Game head coach, I believe. I mean, I guess by default, you got to give it to Byron Scott. Although I know Paul Silas was really well liked, and I get the impression that Byron Scott was respected. Neither of these coaches had prolonged periods coaching all-star or all-star talent or the most talented team, so it was limited as far as how much success they were going to have in the NBA. But I got to give it to Byron Scott just because he went to 2 NBA finals. I mean, that counts for something. Now, those Nets teams had really no chance at beating the Lakers, the Kobe and Shaq Lakers, or Tim Duncan's Spurs. They really had no shot in hell of doing that. But it's an accomplishment because that wasn't expected. But that might be more. Because we give Jason Kidd all the credit for that, right? Or a lot of credit for that. But some of that's coaching too. And when Byron Scott did have talent, he seemed like a really good goddamn coach. Now, Paul Silas was a little bit limited in that aspect because he really didn't often have great teams. But by default, I guess you got to give it to Byron Scott, right? Byron Scott, I think, he has the better resume. So I have to give it to Byron Scott. But both of these were fine men. Paul Silas was a great man. Great role player. Great role player. I think he's one of the great role players of all time, to be honest with you. Byron Scott's in that trajectory as well. And oftentimes it takes the role player who has just enough talent to be respected by the star players because he's still impactful, but he knows what it's like to also be a player who's expected to perform a role. I mean, I hate to be redundant with the role word, but I mean, those players often make the best coaches, not superstars, not perennial all stars, although there are exceptions to that. Oftentimes, role players make the best coaches. The problem is, um, we're in such a prima donna league where oftentimes role players who become coaches don't garner the respect of those players they're trying to coach. Well, at least some of them. But anyway, that's all I got to say about this one.